It is Friday, October 18th. Let's talk PlayStation. Welcome back, everyone, to another Speedrun episode of LTPS. As always, let's begin with our PS Plus reminder. The October PS Plus Essential lineup, still live on PSN. Make sure you claim those games. Also, we have the PS Plus Extra and Premium October lineup now live on PSN as well, and that also means we now have some games that are going to be exiting in about a month's time on November 18th, so really about a month from now, you have 30 days to play these games, which we've got a lot of high-profile exits leaving the game catalog, which that primarily being GTA San Andreas Definitive Edition and also Red Dead Redemption 2, so the Rockstar stuff is typically always in there for like 6 months. But you've also got The Sims 4 City Living, Dragon's Dogma, Superliminal is really good. I'm a big fan of Klonoa Fantasy Reverie series, and you can definitely get that done in a weekend, but you will not have much time to jump into the various Kingdom Hearts games. You've got HD 1.5 and 2.5 Remix, HD 2.8 Final Chapter Prologue, Kingdom Hearts 3, Melody of Memory, a lot of Kingdom Hearts games all leaving, so those games take a long time. You might want to play those now if you're looking to check out that series. You've also got Moving Out, Leaving, Overcooked 2, some of those really fun couch co-op games. Yeah, a lot of really big exits. I will say it is something where maybe it's getting a little bit concerning. We always do that audit of the PS Plus game catalog every year, and so the last year we did see a lot of, kind of high-profile exits, I would say. We're seeing the same thing in recent months where, in terms of the input frequency, it's not really sort of keeping up with the pace of the stuff that's leaving, and that's a bit of a problem with how expensive the service is nowadays for Extra and more so on Premium. So it'll be interesting to see what our audit looks like during the third year, when we've now got 3 years after the proper relaunch. The first year was really good, really encouraging, a lot of solid stuff, but a lot of high-profile exits, and we're just not really seeing the same stuff go back in to sort of replace what's been leaving as of late. So that third-year audit will be interesting for sure. Now, one thing we can say about PS Plus Premium, though, is some question marks that we had for some games that we knew were going to be in the October lineup, that being Dino Crisis for PS1, which that game, much like the other Capcom classic on there, Resident Evil Director's Cut, that game cannot be purchased a la carte, not separate. It is locked behind PS Plus Premium, and there's also no trophies as well, which I think is maybe not nearly as surprising. But this has been a trend with Capcom, with these two titles in particular. What is also noteworthy is that with Bandai Namco, there were initially some games that they had as well that were paywalled behind Premium. That was only like, I think, a year exactly where they then removed the paywall, and then you could buy the games separately as well. And I think those were always grandfathered in if you had the license on PlayStation 3 or Vita. But in the case of this game, RE Director's Cut, I know there was a weird regional thing where I guess in Europe you could, or no, it was either the United States you could not do it if you had a US PSN account and you bought the game from that storefront, wouldn't work. European licenses would be granted to allow you to own the game on PS4, PS5, and that was the only way to own the game on PSN. But in this case, with Dino Crisis, the availability is only in North America, I believe, and that does not get grandfathered over. So definitely a little bit frustrating there, especially when you have to consider it probably is more of a Capcom thing, since it is a publisher-by-publisher agreement, where we saw this was the case with Bandai Namco. And you have to figure with Capcom, it's like, okay, well, I mean, you're not really going to subscribe to a $160 a year subscription for these two PS1 games, right? Little silly. You would like them to eventually offer these a la carte and grandfather all licenses. Hopefully that'll happen eventually, like we saw with Bandai Namco PS1 games. Now, the other classic game that we were curious about is SIREN for PS2, where I think this was kind of a safe expectation, but it did replace the existing one, or rather the old one that was from the old PS2 program on PlayStation 4. It is something where if you did download it, if you have it locally on your console, or if you just, at the very minimum, downloaded it at some point so it's in your game collection library on PSN, you always have access to re-download it. But if you did not download it ever before on your PSN account, then you have no access to it now, so it's officially sort of delisted, and it's been replaced by the new one, which is still primarily very similar emulation. I've not had the chance to really sit down and go through it or compare them. I do have them both installed right now, but the big difference being you've now got the save states, rewind video presets, so Just a lot of really good quality of life features. The other big thing actually is the trophy list as well, because the old game actually did not have a platinum. There's only like 12, 13 trophies in there, which was just kind of a bummer, obviously. So this one has a much bigger list, full platinum. So that does bode well for the eventuality that we expect they are going to maybe replace a lot of those old PS2 games from the old program and give them platinums where they didn't have platinums before, and also spruce them up and make sure they're playable on PlayStation 5 if they had problems on the console before through backwards compatibility. I will say this, very strange that SIREN, this game is, this file size is way bigger this time around on PS4 5. It's like 26 something gigabytes, which is substantially larger than most of the other PS2 games, either from the new program or the old program as well. So not really sure what's going on there. It seems like a bit of an outlier, but I did find that noteworthy when I initially started downloading the game. I'm like, why is the file size so big for this PS2 game? So that I found a little bit strange, not sure what's going on there, but otherwise we do have this updated PS2 game, which again bodes well for them probably replacing the other ones as well. Next up, we should also mention that the updated Welcome Hub is now finally rolling out for those in the UK as well, so might be something where I'm already very late on this. I'm not sure how many people do or do not have it. I was seeing a few comments as recently as like 1 or 2 nights ago where they're like, yeah, I still don't have it just yet, but we've seen it roll out to various countries in Europe. Now for the UK, it seems like they're finally getting it over there, so if you still don't have it just yet, again, it's simply a server-side thing. You don't have to update your console. I'm seeing some people even say that they'll like close down a game, like try to start up another one, and then all of a sudden it appears. So that's all it is, but it does appear to finally be rolling out to most people, and I will add here that now that it is finally available for most people on PSN, I would love to see it really expanded upon, where they open it up to developers, maybe have some more bespoke widgets that will relate to any content that you own on PlayStation Network, and you could have sort of like an activity card, some at-a-glance information for, let's say, players and lobbies, or maybe inventory for a particular game, and you can still toggle that on and off at your own whim. I think there's a lot of ways that this can go as far as like a widget-based interface, so would love to see that be on the roadmap here for expanding on the feature. In other retail PlayStation news, we also have some details on Sony's possible Black Friday sale for PS5 consoles, and it does seem like this will be the best deal for a brand new PlayStation 5 the company has ever offered so far. So this is coming from Bilbo Kuhn writing for Deal Labs. They've had a very good track record on information pertaining to either PS Plus titles or more specifically deals that show up on PSN or PlayStation Direct. So they are claiming that Sony will offer 2 new PS5 bundles for Black Friday, that being a PS5 disc drive or a digital console, with a download code for 8 exclusive Fortnite skins and 1,000 V-Bucks. So they're looking to move a lot of consoles to probably a lot of families and children this holiday season, but the price here is the big thing. So the expected price should be during the Black Friday sale, because I guess they're going to announce these consoles a little bit sooner and they'll have the standard MSRP, but the actual sale price will be $425 USD for a disc console or $375 for the digital edition. That is, as far as I know, here in the US, the cheapest the consoles have ever been brand new, directly from PlayStation with a warranty. So that is a very good deal. I mean, it's great that, you know, occasionally we're seeing, like with the refurbished consoles, or there was a recent sale where they again knocked it off like by $50 or something, that you do have these windows where the console can be a little bit more affordable, since we are in this marketplace now where like consoles just don't really go down in price anymore over their lifetime like they used to. That's the historical norm, and that's not the case nowadays. So pretty decent Black Friday deal. I'm hoping they'll also do a lot for the controllers and games, which is also usually typical, but they've been pretty stingy lately with the controllers, so who knows at that point. I'd love to see the Edge get down in price as well. Moving on to a story that was not on my bingo card for what this company would be doing nowadays, but PlayStation The Concert was announced. And this will be a live concert of OSTs from various PlayStation Studio games, that being God of War, The Last of Us, Ghost of Tsushima, Horizon, and many others that reflect their 30 years of making games. That's what it says on the PlayStation blog. Tickets are on sale right now for tour dates across 2025 for the UK and Europe, and the show will come to the US at some point as well, going into, again, 2025 and even 2026. They're going to be visiting like 200 plus cities, and it's a whole big thing. Live performances from like Bear McCreary for God of War or Gustav for The Last of Us, which, you know, I'll say this, I mean, this is not an uncommon thing. Some publishers do these live concert presentations for their OSTs throughout their games, like Square does it for Final Fantasy. There's the Persona P live shows that they do, and they can be pretty fun, pretty hype. I myself love OSTs, and I spend a lot of time listening to video game soundtracks because some of them really are incredible. So, you know, it's not something I thought they would do. I mean, this was not at all on my bingo card, but sure, why not? I don't know if I would go to one. Depends on how close one is to me, but I guess if you are into OSTs, it's something to look into. I mean, I guess it's more noteworthy that they're doing some kind of like live tour presentation style thing. Again, it's very particular, right? This is only for video game music, but they might have like cool, you know, swag and merchandise, and also depending on the venue they rent out, it could be a, you know, a really fun thing to go to. I'm sure if you're a concert goer, then you kind of know what you're getting into. So, I mean, I'll say this, I guess that's like a really cool thing to do for fans that are, again, really into going to these kind of things. The one thing we could maybe say is like, okay, the company is doing something that is also sort of going back to a PSX style event, in that it's an in-person experience for like the dedicated audience for PlayStation fans. Not quite the same, obviously, but I guess it does bode well for Sony finally doing more sort of consumer-focused shows like this, right? Whether it's OST performances, maybe another PSX if they ever do something like that again. Also having like those E3 conferences at like participating movie theaters, if you remember that. Just more in-person experiences. I would like to see them do more of those. So if anything, I would say this is good news, even if you're not interested, because maybe they'll, you know, explore more of these options in the future. Moving on to some Astrobot news, we did know this was coming fairly soon, and it's already here, which is Astrobot Speedrun levels, or rather one level, because this is how they're going to be doing it. So basically the levels are going to come out on a week-by-week basis. We just had one come out yesterday, that one being called Building Speed. That's where you use the Barkster, the Bulldog booster, and there is 2 new VIP bots to rescue for every new level, which the new ones, again, are going to come out every Thursday. So October 17th, we just had that one. October 24th is going to be Let It Slide. October 31st, Spring Loaded Run. November 7th, Helium Heights. And November 14th, Rising Heat. So more Astrobot goodness. I will say I would have preferred maybe them to all come out in one go, but I'm fine with the week-to-week thing, since they also did that in a similar fashion on a monthly basis with Astro's Playroom building up to the final game coming out. But it looks fun. It's just, you know, for me, I think I'm going to let them sit and build up, and then I'll jump into them all in one go, and I'm sure we'll probably film my experience for that as well, because I wasn't able to really include that much footage from my like 3-hour supercut with the sort of the sacred symbol separate levels, excuse me, the speedrun challenge gauntlet style levels for the PlayStation button. So would be happy to jump into these and see how challenging and fun they are. And I'm not really a speedrun person, so I won't really try to go for good times, but it still does speak to that certain receptor in my brain that I really love about platform games in general. So the first one already looks very fun. Next up, we have a very brief update on the status of Concord, which is not really a whole lot to go on outside of pure speculation as to what Sony may or may not do with the game, based on the recent change logs that are happening on the Steam database listing for the game, because there are some very public listings that are showing the game is having some changes on a nearly daily basis, which means Sony is, you know, messing with the game in some way. We just don't know exactly why, what the context is. Does that imply the game's coming back? Does it imply it's never coming back again? That's really where we'll leave it, because I don't think anybody at this point has the answer. I will say I'm a little bit surprised, I guess, that it's been this long and we don't actually have like even a more thorough report, or maybe, you know, more insight coming from like maybe somebody that's kind of that would do the same thing with like what happened with Colin, where they're reaching out to a reporter and giving some details on what's really happening behind the scenes, or maybe they're just trying to keep this entire process like airtight as far as what they do or do not plan on doing with the game. But I'm very surprised that even unofficially, you know, in terms of the rumor mill, we're not getting an inkling as to what the fate is for this game. But what we can say is that they are doing something, and the answer is still mostly unknown. Let's move on to Horizon Zero Dawn Remastered for PS5 and PC, where over on the PlayStation blog, Nixxes has outlined a number of enhancements and what they're really doing to this game as far as their remastering efforts go on PS5 and PC, since this is still their first new big content project that's not a PC port. And they really did go into great detail as to what they are doing for this game, a lot more than I think we initially thought. So outside of the big mocap stuff that we already heard about, Nixxes also looked at the original concept art of the game to try and better match the intended foliage and distance. So they're really ramping up that stuff in the biomes where you'd expect a lot of foliage to appear. They've also reviewed all the villages, outposts, and cities and tried to make them feel much more lively with NPCs that can move around, work, and fulfill their needs, and they really ramped up the amount of NPCs in those villages. So very similar to Forbidden West, where some of those giant cities and outposts looked very big and had a lot of moving parts, and they did feel very lively. So again, trying to bring the game back up to where Forbidden West is. They also brought in all the terrain materials that were from Forbidden West and replaced those in Zero Dawn. For a lot of the building block materials, that being your objects like rocks, plants, buildings, they increased the resolution of the textures and also adjusted the LOD range to use the higher mesh versions further out. And as for all that new mocap that they captured for the various conversations and dialogue options, Nixxes apparently built a number of new tools in Maya to streamline the process of replacing the old animations or tweaking the exact areas they needed to tweak. That being, you know, weird circumstances with maybe the mocap person's shoulders versus the in-game shoulders, maybe where the eyes are looking during conversation points. Just really going into detail as to what they did to really bring this game up to the visuals that Forbidden West is known for. Again, it's like so much more than we can really say here. But it's fascinating how there's been a little bit of a U-turn with this game, just in that, wow, they're actually doing so much more for this game, and it's still a $10 upgrade, which as far as like remastering goes, I mean, this game I would say is maybe going a little bit above and beyond what we were expecting previously. And because there is that $10 upgrade, well, curiously, they're actually offering this for the first time, because as far as I know, they've never done this, which is you can pre-order the upgrade. So before, if you had an existing copy of a game that you know is getting a native PS5 version, and let's say it does have an upgrade path coming, you would have had to wait for the game to go live on PSN, and then you would have had to download the full game right then and there. So there would be a pretty big delay on like how soon you could start playing that game. You can't preload it unless you're buying the game straight up. But in this case, if you are an existing owner, you can pre-buy the $10 upgrade, which will then allow you to preload the game when that goes live, because the game is still coming out fairly soon. And it seems like a lot of folks actually are jumping at the opportunity for what feels like a very small $10 fee for a very big upgrade for this game. So pretty fascinating to see. And I think it's something where if you're not into, you know, Zero Dawn or more Horizon or all that jazz, I think this does speak volumes about what Nixxes could be busy doing after this, right? That's what I find is maybe more noteworthy, like what we were talking about previously with Jetpack Interactive, Nixxes. We've got other support studios like Malaysia and Valkyrie Entertainment, and so there's just, you know, different things these studios can be working on and how they can better support the rest of PlayStation Studios. In the case of Nixxes, where this is their first big, you know, newer content project, it's encouraging, right, to know that they might be doing more things like this and perhaps touching, I would hope, older properties as well. So let's have our fingers crossed here and think that maybe that will happen for some IP that really does need to be spruced up and brought forward on PS4 and PS5. Moving on to some PlayStation 5 Pro news, where we have some new coverage coming out of, again, Digital Foundry for this time Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, where they are once again looking at these two games, or rather this one game, very closely, comparing the base console with the PS5 Pro enhancements. So this was, again, done by Oliver McKenzie at Digital Foundry. Full video link down below because they say a lot more than what we're going to summarize here, but some basic summaries that we can go over is that the actual baseline comparison here is going to be the base PS5's RT performance mode versus PS5 Pro's performance pro mode is what it's called, which is basically just resolving a much cleaner 4K image quality using PSSR off an internal resolution of what they pixel count as 1584p. The RT reflections also appear to be a lot cleaner on the Pro, and fine edges are softer on certain materials or surfaces compared to what the anti-aliasing is doing on the base console. Now, some of these comparisons do show a pretty decent-sized difference, but in other cases where Oliver is showing particle effects, the jump doesn't seem nearly as clear. He does mention that as far as like how the particle effects sort of come in and out of view, that's where the difference is more clear on the Pro. Same goes for like the zoomed in screens on Ratchet's fur, where again both seem to be very good. Now, comparing the base fidelity mode to PS5's performance pro mode, you will find that the base console is undeniably spitting out a sharper image quality. So the fidelity mode is also still, you know, the one that has like the sharper image quality. It also is displaying the highest setting for crowd density as well, where you've got that early parade sequence, and there's a lot more citizens on screen. So it is still like, if you're looking to play the game at 30 FPS, or if you have no problem playing at 30 FPS, even on the base console, you will get generally a much cleaner image quality across the board. But if you're looking for doubling the frame rate and playing the game at 60 FPS with a near 4K image quality that does, in a lot of cases, stack up close to the fidelity mode, then that will be your option for this game in particular. Ratchet is always the one game where, in my view, it is one of the like few standout like real next-gen titles where it looks absolutely bonkers. And I played that game at 30 FPS right when it came out because the image quality, in my view, was like sharp enough to where I was like, yeah, I'd rather have this game look like a, you know, really beautiful Pixar film versus the, it wasn't like blurry per se, but rather the frame rate hit did not really bother me nearly as much. But I tend to have a higher tolerance for that stuff, especially with how often I sometimes go back to like PS3 and under consoles, and I like playing on, you know, native like local hardware, so the frame rate is always as iffy as it ever was on those consoles. So for me, tolerance is always like easy to sustain, but Pro does still seem to be a valid option for those that are looking to play at higher frame rates. In other Insomniac adjacent news, we also had this rumor pop up very recently about possibly hearing more info for Marvel's Wolverine very soon, perhaps like today even, based on what may or may not happen. So this rumor comes from Curacasis, where previously they've been privy to some info going on before in the game's business. Most recently, they were the ones that initially spotted the, or rather gave us some insight into LEGO Horizon Adventures, and based on how they might have gotten that info, which might have been, you know, back-end website scrapping, trying to data mine websites, perhaps that's how they're figuring this out. So they did mention, and I quote here, "From my little digging, it looks like Sony is gearing up to show off some new stuff from Marvel's Wolverine. It's hard for me to determine when it'll happen, but I'm guessing it'll be this year, either at TGA or at some unannounced super secret event." Now they say super secret event, but that's just them implying that it could really be anything, although people are quick to point out that, hey, could this happen tomorrow, as in today, which is going to be the Marvel Games presentation at New York Comic-Con? And they say, yeah, I think we should keep that event in mind. So we won't have to wait long to see if that may end up happening. But if it is from like data mining and things like that, which is typically how some of these accounts will find that info, that means the sort of presentation materials are being made and drafted and they live or exist somewhere online. We can see why this info might end up appearing eventually, right? Maybe sooner rather than later. Which I'll say too, I mean, if it's not today, The Game Awards, I would say, is also a very realistic possibility because Sony does like to always give Jeff Keighley something. And maybe if there is one, maybe another state of play or something that the company does right before the year closes out. I mean, there's still a lot of speculation and in some cases expectations that they should do something separate away from other events that is in celebration of the 30th anniversary. Not even so much a matter of selling PS1 style consoles and accessories to you, but in December on the 3rd, maybe doing something, some kind of, again, state of play, or not saying it should be a showcase or anything, but I think we are bound to get some decent info before the year closes out. But in the case of Insomniac and perhaps Marvel's Wolverine, which is, I think, due for some, some kind of announcement, whether that's a small screenshot, maybe some new footage finally, I think we're just about there. So I guess we'll have to wait and see, but we'll find out very soon if it is at New York Comic Con. Next up, we had something very interesting pop up for PS VR2, and that is this one example from one studio where they shipped a PS VR2 version of their game, which is Max Mustard. This game recently came out on PS VR2. It's a 3D platformer, looks really fun. It just got that PS VR2 version, and the developers gave some interesting insight into how well the game is selling. So over on the PSVR subreddit, a Toast Interactive team member said that support from PlayStation players has been overwhelming, and that the game came out for MetaQuest back in March, where the headset has like a 20 million plus unit install base. But regarding sales of the game, they said, and I quote here, "Now, we all know that PSVR 2 hasn't quite received the attention or hardware sales it truly deserves, with approximately 2 million units shipped, 10% that of the Quest. Despite being a fraction of the market, Max Mustard has sold better on PSVR 2 during the first 2 weeks of launch than it did on MetaQuest. We thought this was an interesting statistic that breaks the norm of what the industry is seeing." Now, what I'm curious about is, does that break the norm? I mean, I think we talked about this before. It might have been a while ago, but PSVR 2 clearly not selling well. We don't have confirmed numbers, right? They say 2 million, but we don't really know for certain where the headset is. Sony's not reporting numbers, and so we have every sort of third-party metric in the book here to look at the headset and go, my God, not doing well, no Sony support, doom and gloom left and right. But it's very similar to PlayStation Vita of all things, in that even though the headset is not doing well on paper, it's the kind of audience that is a bit more niche and very dedicated, and so the buyers on that headset might be more inclined to buy games at a higher ratio versus maybe a headset like MetaQuest. Vita was very much the same way, and why it had this like indie boom during the back half of its life cycle, and why a lot of indie devs at the time were fully embracing Vita, because they don't have to sell like 30 million plus units on Vita, or even a million plus on Vita, right? I mean, they could comfortably ship 10 to 15,000 units, maybe even more than that on Vita, and that was enough for their overhead, their budget, whatever sort of resources they put into the Vita version of the game. But it was something where developers could comfortably make money on that handheld, despite the install base really not being that big. At the end of the day, the software ratio, the sort of ratio you see for how many games are sold on a per system basis, is a really important metric for a lot of studios. And this is why I keep preaching that for the VR space, we need this space to be really lucrative for studios. Developers need to be able to ship on multiple headsets and make money on each of those headsets. Even if it's not big numbers that we're talking about, if they can still make a profit on these games being sold, that is good news, and that will eventually flourish for the VR market long term. So it sounds like a very similar thing. On the flip side, PSP is a handheld in PlayStation history where that had a very large install base. We're talking 50, 60, 70 million. And over time, despite that install base being so big, the tie ratio was not very good. People were not really buying PSP games, which sort of goes into the problem with PSP, which was a lot of piracy for that platform. And, even big studios at the time were really afraid of shipping on PSP because their games were going to get pirated. Whether the install base is big or not, if the audience is there and they're willing to buy games, then, I mean, that's the difference maker, right? So I was always curious about this. I don't think we have many VR developers really coming out and giving, statistics like this. It was a fascinating one to have this example come up, though, because that was something I've always thought is like, yeah, PSVR2, it's not doing well, but in theory, you know, VR buyers and VR players, they're very dedicated to the medium, and so they might still be coming out in droves and buying these games enough to where it still works for those studios. And in the case of MetaQuest, where it's standalone, it's sold to a lot of children, and you know, the sheer volume of headsets they sell, are those still dedicated players, or are they sort of one-off buyers that mess with it and then they kind of put the thing down, right? I mean, there is a difference here in terms of the kind of buyers and players that are investing their time and money on those headsets. So I thought this was very fascinating. I'd love to see more studios come out and give their thoughts on this and how they're doing on the headset, because the thing is, I would actually be totally fine with PSVR2 being like a Vita, and that it is a very sustainable platform for studios, which means you're going to get a lot of long-term software support. PSVR2 at this point, it's VR. It's never going to do gangbusters and sell crazy high numbers. VR still has a long way to go, but it can be a very healthy ecosystem for not just the players, but also the developers as well, which is crucial for this thing long term. Next up, let's talk about some Xbox news, because they had a recent Xbox partner preview presentation, which had a lot of third-party announcements as well. So here is every PS4, PS5 announcement coming out of the recent Xbox partner preview. Starting off with Alan Wake 2, the Lake House DLC. The release date is October 22nd, so we got a new trailer for that. Chronos, The New Dawn is from Bloober Team. That's coming 2025 for PS5. Like a Dragon, Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii, a new trailer for the naval combat in the game. Mouse PI for Hire, this game looks incredible, coming next year for PS4 and PS5. Just love the art style, the sort of cartoony aspect. Subnautica 2 was announced. That's launching next year in the Xbox game preview program. It'll also have 4-player co-op this time around. This is one of those games where they did not confirm a PlayStation version, but you have to safely assume if it's a timed thing, then that's fine. It'll probably come over to PlayStation at some point. Eden's Zero was announced, a new Eden Zero game, so based on the IP. That's coming next year as well. I think that game also did not actually have a confirmed PlayStation version, but they're in the press release it said consoles or something. I can't imagine that game's not coming to PlayStation. We also had a new trailer for Eternal Strands. That's coming next year for PS5. Wheel World got a new trailer as well. This was previously called Ghost Bike with a 2024 release window, but now it's early 2025 for PS5, and they also, I believe, dropped the PS4 version, so had to make a sort of updated announcement there. Phasmophobia got a confirmed console release date, October 29th in early access for PS5 and PSVR 2, so there you go, some horror, with some crazy horror experiences coming in for Halloween just in time. We've got Wu Chang Fallen Feathers, a Chinese Souls-like action game in the late Ming Dynasty, announced as well, coming next year for PS5. And then the final announcement, FBC Firebreak. This is the multiplayer game from Remedy. It's set in the Control universe, and this is a 3-player co-op shooter coming to PS5 next year. They already say right away it's a mid-priced game that will also launch into PS Plus Extra and Premium. So right off the top, we know this game will be available for Extra and Premium members. And, you know, I'm seeing some mixed reactions on that one. I will say, and this is coming from somebody that, as you all know, not really a multiplayer person. I really love Control in that universe so much that even I am looking at this thing going, oh, hold up, wait a second. So I don't know if I'll play a lot of it, but I may very well dive into that one. So happy to see that. But yeah, across the board, some decent announcements. Always cool having these live streams pop up. We're always going to have third-party things come out of this stuff. So that was every sort of PlayStation applicable announcement. There's some games in there that I'm really looking forward to, that being Subnautica 2 and also Mouse PI. That just looks ridiculous. I can't wait for that one. It really does look really good. Moving on to some PlayStation Productions news. We now have a confirmed date for the Until Dawn movie, that being April 25th, 2025. So much sooner than I think we were all expecting, because I thought it was going to be October next year, but that actually is fairly soon, which now begs the question, why did we not delay the game to make sure that it was not in the sort of messy, state that it's in right now, where even with the most recent 1.05 patch on PS5, it's still like this weird screen tearing mess and, poor frame rate and frame rate drops, and it's capped at 30, and it's just still a little bizarre situation given that, this was something Assad Kizilbash, the head of PS Productions, mentioned, which is it's not really all that easy to line up these two mediums in a way where the game comes out right next to the the other transmedia or PlayStation Productions TV film thing that they're doing, which sure makes sense. That means just put the game out there. It'll still benefit from the eventual production going out and then boosting the sales of that game, which is why I think they generally don't really care if the game is ready, just send it out there. But this game was not ready is the problem. So even though it might not be easy to line these things up, it seems like you had an opportunity to actually do that, unless they were like really committed to getting this game out before the year was over and also right before Halloween. Do they really think the game's going to see some sort of decent sales bump during Halloween? I mean, I don't know, but it seems a little bit puzzling. That, or they just had a very strict deadline with Ballistic where they had to meet that deadline, which again goes back to the few layoffs they had where it seemed very clear they're trying to sort of weather the storm of maybe being in between contracts. In this contract, they were not going to get extended or be paid any further out for this game, so they had to get it out the door. Just a very puzzling thing. But what we can say is the movie will be coming out fairly soon, April 25th, 2025. Now, as for the God of War Amazon Prime series, that one is probably much further out now because we're hearing from Deadline that Sony and Amazon Prime, they're restarting the entire thing because the showrunner and executive producer, Rafe Judkins, alongside other executive producers, they've all left the project after doing multiple scripts for the first season. And so the word is that the studios want to move in a different creative direction and bring in a new writer's room. So the status update there is they're looking to basically redo this whole thing, which that is right alongside the recent news for the Horizon Netflix series, where that too is kind of in limbo and not really making any progress at all. So two very big PlayStation IPs that I would say, despite the status update for both of them, I would still expect like they're going to be committed to getting something out. These are really big IPs that the company believes in, so I think they really do want to get something out the door for them, but they're probably going to be very far away now, at least with God of War, where there's still a lot of question marks on exactly how they're going to approach it. I mean, they did say before this would be like, Norse mythology 2018 and up, and how would they explore the Greek past, which would maybe be a bunch of flashbacks, and I don't know. I mean, God of War, I think maybe should just be better suited as a movie, like a bunch of movies, I should say. It doesn't necessarily have to be God of War 1, 2, and 3, and they all get their own movies, but you could probably wrap up the Greek storyline at least in one, maybe two movies, and throw a big Marvel budget at it and just really go all in. I think it would be maybe better suited for that. But what do I know? I think that's what I would prefer, but I think we'll still see it happen. I can't see them not wanting to get this thing done, but it sounds like whatever was made at this point, which I'm hearing for this executive producer, Rafe, not really a good track record there based on what they worked on before, so I think this might actually be good news. So it seems like this thing's probably very far away. Now, with all that said, it is time for Let's Talk Plus, the weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway, where one of you can win a $10 PSN code. I would like to congratulate this viewer right here. I'll be contacting you very soon via email or X, and if you'd like to win a $10 PSN code, it is so simple. Follow the link down below, enter the Gleam giveaway, and supporting this channel a number of ways can gain you an entry, and I'll announce the winner next week, because I'm trying to help pay for your games. Those are all the stories from this past week that I wanted to talk about with you all, and our Tuesday video was a conversation on the future of PlayStation, how PS6, in theory, I've thought a lot about this, but it's a console that will be very similar to the early PS3 models in that it will play locally, we hope, 3 generations of PlayStation, then throw in all the stuff on PSN where foundationally we've got PS1, 2, 3, PSP, Vita ports on the store. Like, there's just, as far as compatibility goes, a lot of upside for various future PlayStation consoles, so more of a conversation topic there I wanted to touch on. But coming up on Tuesday, probably something else again. You know how it is. I don't really know exactly what that video will be, but it will probably be something. But that is pretty much it. So that concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Benecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you all next Friday.